So this is going to be a little bit different from my previous videos. As you know, I typically walk you through one of the stories, talk a little bit about the writing process, share some fun behind the scenes facts. But for this video, I kind of want to take a step back and talk a little bit about some of the deeper issues that I confronted while writing this book. So you probably know, if you have seen the back of the book or if you've looked at other materials that I post on Instagram and Facebook, that I'm a Christian. And it's a very integral, very important part of who I am as an artist. In fact, the story about how I came to know Christ actually is very rooted in my identity as an author. So a big part of it is that books and writing played a role in that whole story. And one of the ways that happened was through Flannery O'Connor. Flannery O'Connor is one of the great novelists and short story writers of the 20th century. And she's known for portraying dark realities of who we are as sinful people in a way that simultaneously looks at the darkness, but also reveals the hope that's found in Christ. And the question that all of her characters have to confront is, what do I do with the gospel? So that's a little bit of background that will explain the role that she's kind of played in my identity as a writer. I read her novel Wise Blood, which tells the story of a guy who comes back from World War II to find that he no longer fits into the world that he used to be a part of. And a big part of that is a religious background that he chooses to reject. So he becomes a staunch atheist, and he founds his own religion called the Church of Christ Without Christ. And he goes into the streets preaching this gospel of the only hope that there is that there's no hope. Jesus did not rise from the dead. He didn't raise the dead. The hope is that there's no hope to be found except in yourself. So what's really interesting about that story is that that novel played a really integral part in making me decide to become a Christian. And it was because it made me look at my own darkness. And I mean, this guy is bad. He frequents whorehouses. I mean, he steals things. He lies to people. He's manipulative. And what you might look at is, how does that kind of a character make you want to be a Christian? And it isn't just about the darkness that that character reveals in myself as a reader. It's about the fact that at the end of the book, Jesus finds him. He spends the whole story trying to get away from Jesus, only to realize that that is impossible. So why am I talking about this? What does this book and my conversion experience have to do with the Goodbye Love generation? It's simple. Dark content in books does not equal hopelessness. Dark content in literature does not make redemption for readers impossible. It happened with me, and it happened with a host of other people that I know. So one thing that I've discussed pretty extensively with people about my book is, how can you be a Christian and write about characters that are doing these horrible things? There are people that are broken, that are responding to trauma in a way that people respond to trauma. It's very realistic. And realism is important to the kind of work that you want to create as a writer. If I were to write about this topic without having the characters using bad language, without having them be on drugs, blasting the US government, doing all manner of things that they do, this would not be a realistic book. In fact, by doing that, by trying to water down or sanitize my subject matter, I would be dishonoring my community. I would be dishonoring the people I know that were in Kent on May 4th, 1970, who lived through this era and dealt with the kinds of moral dilemmas that these characters face in regard to how war affects their relationships. And by all means, if you have religious views of any kind that prevent you from writing about certain things, I'm not saying to go against your conscience and do it. But I am saying that if you want to portray the world realistically, you have to let your characters behave badly. And you have to allow the subject matter that you're writing about to take the forefront rather than your personal views. What you end up with if you don't do that is fiction that is not only unrealistic, but preachy and focused on your agenda instead of what the story wants to be. I had a very well-meaning woman that I went to church with years ago about the time that Bone China Girls came out. She read that book and got back to me and said, you know, you're a lovely writer, but why don't you write something happy? Why don't you write about people coming to Jesus? And my answer for that is, I don't write that kind of fiction. I write what I feel led to write, and then I trust that God is going to get the book and get what I wrote to the people who most need it. And because he's God, he can use it regardless of what it is. Realistically portraying things can provide a kind of salvation for readers who are looking for what it is that you're writing.